Listen carefully, not because it will inspire you, but this is because it will uninstall your system. Listen to it carefully, because it could change the way the world treats you. While you are trying to be polite, someone less competent than you is taking your place. While you're waiting to be recognized, someone else is, acting as a leader and achieving victory. As Machiavelli said, "He who appears strong dominates. Those who appear weak become stepping stones for others." This video is not cheap inspiration. This is a psychological rulebook that most people will never have the courage to adopt. There's a truth that's never spoken openly, not because it's false, but because it's too dangerous for those who prefer to sleep on, believing the world is just. The truth is simple and stark. The world doesn't react to your nature. The world reacts to your behavior. And Machiavelli seemed to understand this centuries before modern psychologists dared to write on the subject. If you enter a room feeling small, the room senses it before you even speak. If you present yourself as someone who is self-doubting, that doubt lingers in the air like a scent. And then something invisible, but crucial happens. People begin to see you as someone who can be ignored, interrupted, tested. This is not because they are bad, but because human behavior follows tacit rules. Machiavelli didn't talk about morality. He talked about methodology. He observed the battlefield like a strategist. And what he understood was simple. Before you gain power, you must appear powerful first, not later. This is what differentiates naivete from wisdom. When you make yourself small in the hope of being accepted, the world doesn't embrace you. It crushes you, not with cruelty, but with logic. Those who show themselves weak invite domination. Those who show themselves strong impose limits without even saying a word. And perhaps this is bothering you. Perhaps somewhere in your mind you're thinking this is arrogance, pride, or exaggeration. But Machiavelli would have answered this objection before it even arose. Don't confuse strategy with arrogance. It's one thing to have a sense of superiority, quite another to behave as if one cannot be treated kindly. Notice how people react when someone enters a room with a firm posture, a calm gaze, and a composed silence. It doesn't matter if that person is the smartest or most capable in the room. It's enough that, don't try to explain too much. Psychological stress arises from not asking for permission to exist. People change their behavior. They observe. They assess. Why? Because the human mind looks for signals. It always has. Signals of leadership, signals of dominance, signals of who should be followed and who can be used as a stepping stone. Machiavelli understood that these signals stem not from essence, but from representation. Whoever appears to be the winner wins the contest before it even begins. Now think honestly. How many times have you seen less capable people in high positions? How many times have you seen an ordinary person be considered superior? And how many times have you yourself been underestimated, not because of a lack of ability, but because you overexpressed your insecurities? The fault isn't in being imperfect. The fault lies in behaving as if he needs to prove it all the time. Machiavelli said, "He who explains himself too clearly reveals his weakness. He who expects approval from others loses his strength. He who waits for approval before making a decision has already lost half the battle." And now comes the most uncomfortable rule. The world doesn't judge your inner self. It judges your outer appearance, your demeanor, your calmness under pressure, your silence when everyone else is talking loudly. This is what engenders respect, not requests, not apologies, not misunderstood politeness. There's a profound difference between humility and submission. True, humility doesn't diminish the self, but rather maintains itself. Submission, on the other hand, disguises itself as kindness and begs for acceptance. Machiavelli disliked this approach, not out of moral contempt, but because he understood its ultimate consequence. Those who diminish themselves become invisible. That's why he emphasized that victory originates in the mind before it ever takes hold. If you think of yourself as inferior, the world only confirms your judgment. But when you behave like someone who can't be easily dismissed, something changes. People listen more. They question less. They weigh every word before confronting you. And note, this doesn't require you to lie. It requires you to control what it reveals. You may feel insecure inside. You may be afraid. You may be building things for the world to see. None of this matters if you understand this basic principle. It's human nature to feel vulnerable. Showing weakness is an invitation. Machiavelli didn't preach cruelty. He preached shunning naivete. He knew that those who don't control their own image are influenced by the perceptions of others, and perceptions of others are rarely kind. So, before any outward achievement, a silent decision must be made. Will you continue to present yourself as someone who seeks approval? Or will you begin to behave like someone who has already determined their own worth? Because the moment you enter any space as if you have something to lose, the game starts to stack against you. But when you enter as if you're not begging, as if you're observing, as if you're choosing when to speak, something in the atmosphere shifts, and people feel it. In the next point, Machiavelli elaborates on this argument. He explains why showing strength is not the same thing as actually having strength, and why concealing weakness is one of the most rational actions a human being can learn. And this is where many people fail, because maintaining an image before you're ready isn't comfortable. But the world doesn't wait for you to be ready. It reacts to your presence. If you keep reading, you'll understand why almost no one reaches the heights of success without learning how to get to the top by behaving like someone who already belongs there. There comes a point in life when we all realize an uncomfortable truth. The world doesn't work the way we were taught. The fairest person doesn't win. The most honest person doesn't advance. Those who expect recognition don't lead. Machiavelli understood this with the utmost boldness. He wrote not to console, but to warn. Think of a typical situation. A meeting, a room full of people. Some people talk too much. Some people explain too much. Some people try to please everyone. And there's always someone who speaks less, observes very carefully, and doesn't feel the need to prove anything. Who do you think has the most influence in that situation? It's not the person who talks the most, but it's the person who's most controlled. Machiavelli understood that power is rarely proclaimed. It manifests itself, and it is primarily revealed in the way a person behaves when they could argue, but choose to remain firm, when they could justify themselves, but choose to remain silent, when they could ask questions but decide to imagine. Most people make the same psychological mistake. They believe that respect comes only after performance. First, I will work, then I will be respected. Machiavelli's approach was the opposite. First, you establish your position, then the world evaluates your actions based on that position. Those who start at the bottom have to work twice as hard to rise. Those who achieve high positions force the world to adapt to them. This explains why so many capable people are overlooked while those of average ability take charge. This is not a coincidence, but a behavior. Those who prove themselves easily replaceable are treated that way. Those who prove themselves exceptional suffer psychological damage when challenged. And here's a point Machiavelli never romanticizes. Humans constantly test boundaries. They test who can interfere. They test who can exert pressure. They test who can exploit. All of this is driven not by deliberate malice, but by social instinct. If you don't set clear boundaries through your behavior, someone else will do it for you. How many times have you noticed that when you show vulnerability, people seem less attentive to you? They interrupt you. They question your decisions. They take you for granted. And when you show assertiveness, even if you don't change your words, the atmosphere changes. This is because the human mind responds more to behavior than to content. Machiavelli knew this. That's why he emphasized that appearance is not superficial, but functional. The person who controls his image also controls the reaction of others. Now consider something even more disturbing. People in positions of authority are often not the best prepared, yet they make decisions without hesitation. They speak confidently, they make eye contact. They don't ask for permission to stand anywhere. And this, in itself, creates an image of leadership. Machiavelli wasn't advocating perfection. He was advocating that you avoid doubt. Because open suspicion breeds aggression, visible weakness breeds exploitation. The world respects those who appear untouched by deceit, and this applies to everything: work, relationships, conversations, social life. When you enter any conversation expecting acceptance, you lose your power. But when you enter as the one who decides whether the conversation is worth your time, the situation changes. You might think this is a bit harsh. It seems like a calculated move to some extent. But Machiavelli never equated harshness with clarity. He knew that those who refuse to understand human nature are ultimately exploited by those who do. There's a difference between honesty and excessive transparency. There's also a difference between being approachable and being predictable. Machiavelli warned, those who become predictable lose their advantage. Those who reveal everything become easier to control. Keeping secrets is not deceit, it's security. Observe how people react to those who are always available, those who respond too quickly, those who concede to every condition, those who describe their feelings in excessive detail. This kind of behavior reflects powerlessness. On the other hand, those who control their time, their reactions, and their presence convey their importance without even saying a word. And here's an important point. Establishing dominance doesn't require aggression. True dominance lies in silence. It's reflected in the way you enter a room, the tone of your voice, the lack of haste, and the confidence that doesn't need convincing. Machiavelli knew that respect doesn't come from requests. It comes from realizing you're not subservient to anyone, that you can't be easily broken, that you can't succumb to anxiety. If you look closely, you'll realize that the moments when you've suffered the most were precisely those when you've tried too hard to convince yourself, tried too hard to please others, or tried too hard to justify your decisions, not because you were wrong, but because it revealed your emotional dependence on others' approval. And Machiavelli never advocated dependency. He preached psychological autonomy, teaching someone not to need approval is the same as teaching them not to be controlled. In the next section, this argument is analyzed in even more depth. Machiavelli enters the most delicate area, how the human mind responds to direct force. Why trust does not arise from competence, and why ordinary people are able to lead those who are far more capable. This is where many people feel uncomfortable, because understanding this changes the way you see yourself, and most importantly, it changes your behavior even when no one is watching. Machiavelli understood something that few readily accept. Trust comes not from competence, but from the notion of control. Humans don't follow those who possess the most knowledge. They follow those who appear to be the least distracted. In situations of uncertainty, the mind looks for signs of stability, not brilliance. This is why, often, the person who dominates a room is not the most prepared, but the most calm. Notice how we naturally respond to someone who maintains a steady tone of voice even under pressure. Someone who doesn't pace themselves, doesn't clarify their point, and doesn't defend themselves against unseen attacks. This behavior sends a silent message. I know my position. Machiavelli considered this a strategic advantage. Anyone who appears in control creates a sense of security. The person who creates a sense of security gains support. Now think honestly, how many times have you lost your right to speak, not because of any mistake, but because you showed nervousness when asked a question? How many times did you have a good idea, but your behavior diminished its impact? The world responds less to what you say and more to your personality. How do you support your words? Machiavelli knew that words without gestures are empty. At the same time, gestures, even without words, convey power. That's why silence, used correctly, is more valuable than lengthy explanations. Those who talk a lot try to control the environment through words. Those who speak little establish control through tension. And this is where one of the most uncomfortable ideas in Machiavelli's entire thought emerges. People associate calmness with authority. This is not because calmness is proof of truth, but because the mind associates calmness with hierarchical superiority. Those who are desperate appear to lose control of the situation. Those who remain calm appear to be above it. Have you ever noticed that in conflicts, the person who reacts the least usually gains emotional control of the situation? Machiavelli understood that power doesn't need to demonstrate itself. He was imposed through lack of effort. When someone tries too hard to persuade, something seems off. When someone doesn't try to persuade but sticks to their point, the other side begins to doubt themselves. This is the oldest psychological game. Most people believe that leadership is about charisma. Machiavelli would disagree. According to him, leadership is about emotional predictability. A leader is not one who constantly inspires enthusiasm, but one who is clearly unfazed. Distraction creates insecurity. Insecurity breeds challenge. Constant challenge erodes authority. How many times have you seen someone lose respect, not because they failed, but because they demonstrated that failure deeply affected them? This is where the principle of the mask comes into play, not as a lie, but as a tool. Machiavelli believed that you should never reveal your inner state to the world. On the contrary, for him, showing weakness at the wrong time was like handing over ammunition. The world doesn't respond with empathy, but with calculation. There's a common belief that revealing one's vulnerabilities brings people closer together. This may be true in intimate situations, but in a competitive environment, openly revealing one's weaknesses can create a hostile situation. Machiavelli observed that people who reveal their weaknesses too much become predictable. And predictability is a strategic weakness. Do you really think the world rewards completely transparent people? The human mind is always assessing risk and opportunity. When someone displays instability, the minds of others begin to calculate, how far can I go? How much pressure can I exert? How far can I test? This isn't a conscious process. It's social instinct. People who don't control their emotional expression eventually become controlled. Therefore, Machiavelli advocated what many call coolness, but which he self-control. You may feel emotions like fear, anger, or doubt. The fault lies not in the emotions themselves. The fault lies in allowing those emotions to dominate your outward behavior. The person who controls their expression also controls the reactions of others. Notice that truly influential people rarely act in a hurry. They don't rush. They don't try to explain themselves. They don't compete for attention. A lack of hurry is a sign of abundance. Abundance is a sign of power. Machiavelli knew that people who appear to need nothing become the people everyone wants to please. Have you ever wondered why the least needy people are the ones in power? And here's a turning point. The world doesn't test your true strength. It tests your response to pressure. People who panic easily lose credibility. Those who maintain a steady perspective and remain firm without reacting immediately develop an influential personality. This influence stems not from talent, but from internal control that is displayed externally. Machiavelli never advised shouting, pressuring, or insulting anyone. This is brute and unstable power. He preached silent power, a power that doesn't need to prove itself because it has already taken psychological positions. Those who understand this unconsciously begin to behave differently. Fewer words, more presence, less explanation, more determination. And when that shift happens, the world reacts. Not because you've changed on the inside, but because the signal it sends has changed. People are choosing their words more carefully now. Machiavelli observed something that few consciously understand. The body speaks before the mind, and appearance precedes intention. Even before you utter a word, the environment determines how it will treat you, not through moral judgment, but by reading signals. Humans are trained from the very beginning to interpret body posture, rhythm, gaze, and silence as indicators of hierarchical status. That's why two people speaking the same sentence can evoke completely different reactions. One is listened to, the other is questioned. One is stalked, the other is tested. The difference isn't in the content of the sentence, but in the way it's said, the way of communicating messages through the body. Machiavelli knew that authority comes not from explanations, but from consistency between words and deeds. A person who says something and then backs it up with gestures conveys a sense of dominance. A person who says something and then backs it up conveys a sense of doubt. The human mind recognizes this inconsistency in an instant, and when it does, it adjusts its behavior. Think about how you enter a space, the pace of your steps, the position of your shoulders, the alignment of your spine, how you exist in that space. None of this is neutral. Everything signals something. And the most dangerous thing is that it signals even when you think you're saying nothing. How many opportunities have you missed because you entered environments that were too small or too large? Machiavelli never loses sight of this. For him, the body was a political tool, not in the sense of dramatic manipulation, but in the sense of silent command. A body that hesitates invites disruption. A body that closes itself off invites progress. A body that maintains itself sets an invisible boundary. And the gaze is perhaps the most brutal signal. A person who holds the gaze without aggression conveys confidence. A person who quickly averts the gaze conveys submission. This isn't about staring hostilely, it's about not trying to escape. Machiavelli understood that a person who doesn't flee from the gaze doesn't flee from pressure. Have you ever noticed how quickly insecure people speak? As if they want to finish quickly to avoid criticism? This is also a signal. Speaking too quickly reflects anxiety. Anxiety reduces a sense of power. The one who controls the time controls the conversation. Machiavelli taught something simple but difficult to put into practice. Delay your reactions, not for fun, but for dominance. Pausing before speaking creates seriousness. It arouses expectation. It establishes hierarchy. Those who respond immediately appear more readily available. Those who think before speaking appear selective. And choice is power. Another crucial point Machiavelli never overlooked was facial expressions. The face is an open field for those who know how to read it. Do overtly. Displayed emotions diminish predictability? On the contrary, they enhance it. What can be easily read is easily influenced. A controlled face is not a cold face, it is a strategic face. People mistake spontaneity for authenticity. Machiavelli said that authenticity without control is carelessness. It's not about who you are, it's about decide what should be visible. Not every truth needs to be revealed, and not everything that is revealed needs to be true. Have you ever noticed that people of authority rarely overreact? They don't laugh out loud. They don't get easily agitated. They don't show excessive surprise. This isn't accidental. It's psychological training, even if subconscious. Overreactions lead to a loss of balance. Anyone who loses their balance loses leadership. And here an important point arises. Most people try to gain respect by being overly friendly. They try to gain approval. They try to convince others. Machiavelli warned, overly friendly behavior weakens one's position. Respect doesn't come from trying to please others. It comes from being respected by others. Self-reliance. Those who seek acceptance have already lost half the battle. Those who seem comfortable even when they remain silent create a sense of unease. People approach them cautiously. They speak thoughtfully. They change their behavior. This doesn't mean being hostile. It means being firm. Machiavelli deeply understood something that's almost invisible. The unease of others can be a weapon. When you don't explain yourself clearly enough, the other person begins to fill the silence with conjecture, and the human mind tends to exaggerate what it doesn't fully understand. Mystery enhances the feeling of power. Have you ever noticed that rare people seem more important than they really are? Scarcity is not about quantity, but about accessibility. People who are always available lose their symbolic importance. Meanwhile, those who appear, observe, act, and then withdraw, create impact. Machiavelli understood that constant presence diminishes significance. Selective presence enhances significance. In everyday life, this means something simple yet difficult. Not being always accessible, not reacting to everything, not responding to every provocation. Every reaction is an investment of energy. Those who react to everything are always at a disadvantage. Then many people realize, this game has been going on forever. The only difference is that now you understand the rules. Machiavelli would never beg for respect. He would consider it a grave strategic mistake. Asking for respect is admitting that you don't deserve it. It puts the other person in the position of deciding your worthiness. And the moment someone decides whether you deserve respect, you've already fallen. True respect doesn't come from speeches or verbal demands. It comes from assessing risk. People respect those who are unflappable, unyielding, and difficult to exploit. This stems not from overt fear, but from subconscious calculation. The human mind constantly assesses who can be pressured and who is futile. Observe everyday interactions. Who is constantly tested? Who is repeatedly interrupted? Whose judgment is questioned? It's usually not the least intelligent person. Rather, it's the least intelligent person. Stagnant. Who overreacts? Who defends themselves before they're attacked? Who starts justifying themselves before they're held accountable? Machiavelli saw this clearly. Whoever anticipates accusation puts themselves in a position to be blamed. A silent process occurs in all human relationships. The emotionally dominant person sets the pace. The one who loses their temper is the one who reacts. And the one who reacts ultimately appears to be playing in the other's territory. Machiavelli knew that true dominance doesn't have to be overt. It occurs when the other person unconsciously changes their behavior. Have you ever noticed that when certain people enter a room, everything slows down? Conversation slows down. The tone changes. People behave differently. There's no direct threat. There's no pressure. There's just a presence. This presence isn't genetic. It's built. Machiavelli taught that power is not something one demands, but something one possesses. Symbol. It is not something you declare. It is something others conclude for themselves. And the less effort you put into persuading others, the more influential you become. This paradox is difficult to accept, but it is reality. Now face a harsh truth. Often you lose not because someone is stronger than you, but because you give up before the confrontation even begins. You laugh even when you don't feel like it. You agree even when you don't feel like it. You justify even when no one has asked. All these small things signal one dangerous thing: a willingness to conform. Machiavelli saw constant concessions as a crack in power. Power is destroyed not by one major defeat, but by small, repeated concessions. Small, daily acts of retreat. Small, ill-timed silences. Small requests for approval. By the time you realize it, your role is already set. And here's a key point. The one who controls their reactions controls the game. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't react as expected, you break the established pattern. The other person becomes unstable. Machiavelli understood this deeply. Humans rely on predictability. When you deviate from the established pattern, you gain an advantage. How many times have you regretted not what you said, but that you said too much? In this context, silence isn't absence. It's pressure. It's psychological space. When you don't respond immediately, the other person begins to fill that space, and they usually fill it with insecurity. Machiavelli knew that deliberate silence forces the other person to open up while you continue to observe. Another common mistake is mistaking kindness for weakness. Machiavelli never advocated needless cruelty, but he did warn against naivete. People exploit limitations when they encounter no resistance. This is not because they are evil, but because that is how the social system works. Where there are no limitations, there is progress. Being assertive and being aggressive are not the same thing. It means being firm in what you accept and unwavering in what you don't. Those who change their stance easily lose respect. Those who remain firm under pressure earn reputation. And according to Machiavelli, reputation was a more valuable asset than any talent. The logic of power reflects a kind of cruelty. People don't respect those who suffer silently, waiting for recognition. They respect those who don't need to display their suffering to maintain their image. This doesn't mean denying suffering. It means choosing when and where it's visible. Machiavelli said, "The world doesn't reward those who break down in public. It rewards those who remain strong enough to keep playing. As soon as you start to embrace it, something changes. Not immediately, but gradually. People start to speak more thoughtfully. Trials become less frequent. Provocations become less effective. This isn't because you've become physically stronger, but because I no longer looked weak." And this is where the story ends, because understanding it isn't enough. Many people understand it, but few can maintain it. Maintaining it requires emotional discipline. It requires giving up instant acceptance. It requires enduring the discomfort of not being understood by everyone. Machiavelli never believed in instantaneous change. He believed in a constant state. For him, power was not an emotional state, but a psychological habit, something that is formed every day through small, invisible choices, long before any external recognition. There comes a point when you have to decide which will control your presence in the world, your immediate emotions or your long-term vision. Most people live as hostages to the present. They react, they explain, they justify themselves, they chase things. Machiavelli would have chosen the opposite path: observation, restraint, positioning yourself correctly, and acting only when the effort is worthwhile. Everything said so far boils down to one simple yet complex point: behaving as if one cannot easily be removed from one's position. This doesn't mean dominating others. It means not needlessly considering oneself inferior to them. It means moving through the world without needing anyone's psychological permission to exist. When you enter a room, your posture should reflect assertiveness, not expectation. Your gestures should reflect confidence, not nervousness. Your silence should reflect intention, not fear. This requires practice. It is not innate but learned. You start by controlling the little things, the timing of your reactions, your body language when you hear something you don't agree with, the decision not to react immediately to provocations, the conscious choice not to over-explain, the discipline not to seek approval where it won't be received. These small changes may seem insignificant, but together they add up to a big impact. Over time, changes occur both internally and externally. Deep down, you realize you no longer need to prove yourself as much. Externally, people begin to change their behavior, not out of moral respect, but because they understand the signals. You begin to be seen as someone who has found their balance. Machiavelli knew that the person who controls their image controls half the social game. The other half comes from consistency. Appearing strong today and weak tomorrow is futile. True power lies in consistency, in emotional predictability, in avoiding unnecessary outbursts, in quiet perseverance. And this is what separates the curious from the committed. This attitude should not be used as a mere show. If it is merely a facade without an inner foundation, it crumbles under our pressure. Machiavelli proposed harmony. Disciplined external behavior while maintaining internal balance is strengthened by strategy, self-control, and clarity. You don't need to be the brightest. You need to be the most stable. You don't need to win every argument. You need to choose which ones are worthwhile. You don't need to be loved by everyone. You need to be respected enough to not be ignored. The world doesn't change because you understand it. The world changes when you understand it. Act accordingly, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable, because that's when old habits try to pull you back. The need to please others, the urge to explain, the fear of appearing harsh. Machiavelli would never expect you to be cruel. He would expect you to be clear-headed. He would expect you to understand that the world does not reward the weak. He would expect you to understand that those who do not take a firm stand are swayed by others. Walking as if this place is your own isn't arrogance. It's inner clarity. It's mastering your energy. When you walk, speak, and make decisions like a person who respects yourself, the world responds in the same rhythm. Not always with praise, but with boundaries. And boundaries are the foundation of respect. Real change happens when it becomes part of your identity, not an effort. When you don't need constant reminders to persevere. When perseverance becomes your natural state. When silence becomes a choice, not an inconvenience. When presence becomes a natural outcome, not an effort. Machiavelli said that very few people reach that point, not because of incompetence, but because of a lack of emotional discipline. Most people prefer instant acceptance to the gradual buildup of authority. But those who go through this process are never treated the same way again. The choice now is not intellectual, but practical. You can close this video and continue reacting as before, or you can start making one small change today. One more pause, one less explanation, one silent boundary, one steady gaze. The course of the game changes not by promises, but by behavior. If this content made you think, don't ignore it. Like the video, leave a comment, even if anonymously. You can even leave a single word, and subscribe to the channel. We're not here to please, but to awaken. For those who have decided to stand out from the crowd and understand the reality of the world. Stop, watch, learn, because whoever understands this game is no longer a pawn.